We'll give you a minute to submit your cards. On the notice of intent regarding revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, as published on pages 1299 through 1303 of the July 20th, 2023 issue of the Louisiana Register, is now called to order. The time is 2:04 p.m. The proposed revisions create an appeals process for graduation. The appeals process creates a rigorous evaluation method in which a student who fails to achieve a passing score on the end-of-course exam in a testing pair may demonstrate proficiency using a portfolio. All students will be required to take all state assessments. The change will be to allow for an appeals process for purposes of graduation only. As a reminder, only comments pertaining to the contents of the proposed rules contained in the notice of intent will be allowed. Please refer to the chapter and section of the bulletin to which your comments relate. Also, for the record, subsequent to the hearing notification, the following individuals not in attendance today have mailed in or hand-delivered comments by the 1 p.m. deadline. I will read the names and I will read whether or not they support or oppose. Frederick Wiltz supports. Kevin Dugas supports. Damon Staples supports. Cherise Guidry supports. Lisa Staples supports. Anna Maria Villamarin Lupin supports. Alice Garcia supports. Hamilton Simons Jones supports. Megan Mills supports. Caroline Jones supports. Bubba Ogeron supports. And Amber Anthony supports. Todd Geis supports. Lynette Reno supports. David Claxton supports. Latrice Gillum supports. Iaro Lopez supports. Anderson Martinez supports. Lizzie Alonso supports. Kimberly Castanalasa supports. Brianna Ventura supports. Haiti Bautista supports. Harold Sanchez supports. Ronald Lopez supports. Matilda De Agro Lobo supports. Naomi Duggar supports. Kanako Asi supports. Margarita Ames supports. Elizabeth Osberg supports. William Kennedy supports. Paul Flowers opposes. Gerald Como supports. Courtney Smith supports. Jared LeBlanc supports. Rachel Morales supports. Mariua Morales supports. Sylvia Alvarado supports. Osmond Lopez supports. Tiffany Morales supports. Catherine Ramirez supports. Danny Taida supports. Jimmy Gutierrez supports. Kelly Alia supports. Brasi Garcia supports. Ever Valadares supports. Maxwell Peralta supports. Crystal Medina supports. Danmar Milam supports. Heidi Dressler supports. Cy Duga supports. Melissa Brumley supports. Dante Hebert supports. DeMarcus McQuain supports. Cynthia Gonzalez supports. Heidi Martinez Vasquez supports. Elvin Gomez supports. Kenneth Romero supports. Jennifer Medina Valle supports. Jester Alvarez supports. Marilyn Guzman supports. Cesar Alvarez supports. Iris Gomez supports. Angelin Julian supports. Michael Olivier supports. Stacy Martin supports. Kycian Thompson supports. Jordan Tucker supports. Chantel Alfred supports. April Moreland supports. Sydney Evans supports. Marielle Pichon supports. James Boutrell supports. Ashana Winsey supports. Eduardo Gonzalez supports. Luis Lampu supports. Ann Hollerman supports. Tanika Simmons supports. Whitney Dickerson supports. Pamela Ruskosner supports. Ron Brody supports. Jamal Hurst supports. Kaylin Toka supports. Caitlin Wills supports. Donald Thomas supports. Rosalind Brown supports. Haritha Allen supports. Ronald George Jr. supports. Alexandria Holmes supports. Ryan Fuller supports. Avis Smothers supports. Tania Holiday supports. Anya Barnes supports. Denise Ellis supports. Layla Clark supports. Namika Dejan supports. Charles Medley supports. Nicholas Moore supports. Eric Schroeder supports. Brianna Smith supports. Aiden Houston supports. Santiago Orduno supports. Raham Hughes supports. Chrisley Espinoza supports. Yasmin Alvarado supports. Caden Houston supports. Tatiana Lewis supports. I don't know if I said Alfreda Bester or not, but Alfreda also supports.
Do not wish to speak.
There are a couple of people who support the recommendation but do not wish to speak. That is Marcus Thomas with LAE and Suzanne Harris with LAE, Louisiana Association of Educators.
Just note for the record that Mr. Morris, Ms. Dr. Belinda Davis, and Mr. Preston Castile are present in addition to Dr. Bofi.
And Superintendent Brumley.
Yes, but more.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, So Dr. Davis has put in a card to speak. Dr. Davis, Millie Harris, Kelly Bacher, and Brian Davis. If you'll all come forward. While we are waiting on them to come forward, Bridget Nealon can come forward, Liz Smith, Caitlin DeVille, and Monique Roberts. So if you represent an organization, you'll have 5 minutes. If you're here as an individual, then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Belinda Davis, and I'm here as myself as a member of BESI. These comments address misperceptions of this policy that I have encountered in editorials and in requests for this hearing. Louisiana is the only state in the country with high-stakes testing for high schoolers that does not have an appeals process. In Texas, their appeals process has demonstrated that 1, appeal graduates are engaged in employment at the same rates as graduates who do not use the appeal, an employment rate that is 40 points higher than that of a student who does not graduate. 2, when appeal graduates attend community college, their persistence rates are similar to the national average of persistence for non-appeal graduates. 3, over the course of a decade, the range of graduates who use the appeals process is between 2 and 7%. We asked ourselves, can Louisiana decrease the number of disengaged youth in our state with a carefully designed appeals process? Can we design a system, a policy, with guardrails to preserve the integrity of our accountability system? We believe that this appeals process does so, and the answer is yes, because of the following components. 1, when a school-based team recommends whether or not a student has met the portfolio requirements, the ultimate decision to grant the appeal rests with the superintendent. This adds a layer of scrutiny that is not in the Texas model. 2, if more than 3% of graduates at a school site use the appeal, the site is subject to an audit by the Department of Education. If the site has failed to comply with the requirements of the appeals process, corrective action must be taken and the state superintendent approves appeals at the site in the following year. 3, to counter the argument that the portfolio is too subjective, none of our employability, proof of employability requirements are subjective. COPS Tech requires a 17 on the ACT. It could be a work key score in silver or an industry-based credential. 4, each appeal student is required to take the EOC at least twice. There is every incentive for the school site and the district to encourage students to pass the EOC after providing the 30 hours of interventions. Why? The only piece of the appeal that will affect the accountability score is the graduation component. The school and the district still receive a 0 for the EOC component of the accountability system. 5, this will not open the floodgates because most students who fail the EOC are also failing the course. The EOC counts for at least 15% of a student's overall grade in a course. If you have a D, failing the EOC means that you were failing the course. This is why our own COVID waivers for EOC exams have barely moved the school's SPS scores. This is a narrowly tailored appeals process. These are all guardrails that are missing from the Texas model that we know is working. To believe that this will not work in Louisiana, you have to believe that our teachers and education leaders are more willing than teachers and school leaders in other states to prioritize the accountability results rather than the best interests of students. You have to believe that our students do not deserve access to something that every other high school student in our entire country has, the ability to demonstrate learning with something other than a standardized test score. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, my name is Brian Davis. I am the Director of Workforce Development and Education for the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. We are the state's Chamber of Commerce as well as the statewide Manufacturing Association. We represent over 2,000 businesses ranging from single-member small businesses to very large companies. Our members and our board of directors support a strong and robust workforce and education development system that will allow Louisiana graduates to compete in our job market. This proposed policy will do the opposite. It will put our graduates at a competitive disadvantage in the job market. This will water down our high school diploma, artificially inflate graduation rates, school performance scores, and school letter grades, at a time when 70% of our Louisiana high schools are rated A or B, even though we're 41st in K-12 education. And it will cause confusion and uncertainty for Louisiana employers seeking to fill jobs with qualified skilled workers. When policies are proposed, we must ask ourselves, will this change positively impact educational outcomes for students? The answer for this proposal is it will not. With that being said, we ask that you please reconsider this policy revision and instead work to address the root causes of students' inabilities to pass standardized assessments rather than implementing policies that will severely water down the Louisiana high school diploma and lower standards. Thank you.
Kelly Backer, Louisiana Kids Matter. It saddens me that I'm here today to testify against the policy revision to Bulletin 741 that if implemented will guarantee our students in Louisiana continue to fall behind their peers in other states at an alarming rate. Our current high school accountability standards are already ridiculously low and allow for overinflation of the high school performance scores. Currently, students can pass the end-of-course assessment at the approaching basic level by only getting 10% of the questions right to earn their high school diplomas. As if those standards aren't already low enough, Bessie is trying to implement a policy that would basically remove all standards for earning a high school diploma in Louisiana. Handing out high school diplomas to all students without any basic competency standards will thrust graduates into a society without being adequately prepared for the workforce or for a post-secondary education. Who will employ graduates that cannot read, write, or compute at a basic 12th grade level? This policy is poorly designed because while it's admirable to find ways to help students, lowering high school graduation requirements will only set our students up for failure in the long run when they are unemployable. Unfortunately, unemployable students end up in a life of crime that has devastating consequences in our communities. A more educated society is a more civil society. Instead of watering down our high school standards, schools should focus on struggling students by providing them with additional resources and support, such as high-dosage tutoring and interventions that meet their needs and catch them up quickly. Research has proven that high-dosage tutoring is effective at catching students up, so why is Bessie not focusing on providing supports for our lower-performing students? Instead, Bessie's plan is to pass a policy that waters down our current high school standards and fails to hold adults accountable for the education of their students. If this policy is implemented, then we can save the state a ton of money by simply sending students home when they are born with their high school diplomas, because this policy makes our high school diplomas a worthless piece of paper. The good news is Bessie has the power to stop the implementation of this policy and instead look to other high-performing states to see how they have improved student scores. Louisiana should look to states like Florida and Mississippi for inspiration because those states were once at the bottom of the pack with Louisiana. But instead of reducing their standards for students, Florida and Mississippi increased their standards, and their students in both of these states have excelled. Florida is leading the nation now with educational outcomes, and Mississippi is rapidly moving up in the nationwide rankings. I'm hopeful that Bessie realizes this is a very flawed policy and decides to stop the implementation of this policy change before Louisiana fails our students indefinitely.
Good afternoon, Bessie Board members. I'm Millie Harris, Executive Director of JCFA, a non-traditional charter school association with 2 campuses in Jefferson Parish and 1 in Lafayette. I'm here today to ask for you all to please not implement this policy. I see it as an opportunity for us to degrade our current accountability system and put our students on a path that is not successful. If you want to be an electrician, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be a plumber, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be an attorney, there are all assessments that you have to take and pass without a waiver in order to receive those certifications and the opportunity to work in those fields. This waiver is a very broad stroke, removing all high-stakes testing from a student who wants to graduate. It's not a waiver for 1 test. It's essentially a waiver for 6 tests. No student should be able to earn their high school diploma without actually earning it. If we're talking about students having to perform on the work keys or the ACT at a high level, they can pass the test. 30 to 35% of my students during any given testing window come to me as 3rd-year cohort students, meaning they've been in high school for 3 years and they've never taken an English or math assessment.
2 of my schools were recently noted for having extraordinary growth towards mastery on reading. We attribute that to the fact that we already provide 30 hours of test prep to every student prior to them taking the test. They complete their course, and we prep them for the test to ensure if they missed anything while they were in class, they got the double dose of it in that tutoring session. We need to apply our resources while the students are in high school and ensure that they have all of the things they need to be successful, because sending them into the world with the expectation of, if I can't meet the standard, I still get the reward, is setting them up for failure. You are not going to get a paycheck if you don't do what your supervisor expects you to do. We're not preparing them for the real world if we continue to tell them it's okay if you don't meet the standard, we'll make a new standard for you. Thank you.
Blaine Edelman, Dr. Aaron Atkins, Dr. Aaron Bindley, and Morgan Camille. You're gonna have to help me, Morgan. Okay. You guys can come on up, and we have 4 ready to testify here. These are for you. Okay, we'll go ahead and start to the left.
Hello, my name is Monique Roberts, and I'm with Couch Parish School Board, and I'm here to say we do support this proposed change to Bulletin 741. Research shows that it takes 5 to 7 years to become proficient in an academic language. Academic language is characterized as being more abstract, context-reduced, and specialized, like the language used in the U.S. history and biology LEAP assessments. Immigrant students entering our school system in Midland High School have a real challenge, especially when it comes to assessments, because of the academic language, which is complex and abstract. They often learn the content and improve their knowledge and understanding of in the context of that lesson or the unit of study, but have difficulty on accumulating assessment, culminating assessment that's filled with complex language and varied contexts. Within the first 2 or 3 years, students' basic interpersonal language skills develop, and the student can function in the classroom and the workforce. They have the basic language needed to be active and productive members of our community. I've heard concerns expressed about graduating students that can't speak English. That's not what this is about. That's not what we're advocating for. We want to graduate students that have worked hard, learned the content, and progressed in their English abilities, and have the level of English needed to be productive members of society. Their grammar may not be perfect, and they'll probably still have an accent, but listen to me. I have a master's in language acquisition, and I still sound like a backwoods Cajun. But it doesn't stop me. I can still be successful with these shortcomings. And our students are actually bilingual. They have an added gift that they can bring with them into that workplace. The students may not have attained the academic English proficiency needed for that U.S. History LEAP test, but they do understand the content, and through a portfolio they can prove it. After going through Couch Parish High School's LEAP 2025 test assessments, I saw English learners that took tests 4 and 5 times. We even had one student that took 22 LEAP assessments to finally be able to graduate after summer school, but not walk with his class. I can only imagine the stress that that child felt each time he sat down to test, knowing that he had worked so hard after arriving in America in middle school, and knowing that in America, to move forward, you need a high school diploma. And this test was the only thing standing in his way from achieving the American dream and moving in that direction. Please let's stop torturing our students with tests and offer alternatives for success.
Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin DeVille. I'm the 9th through 12th grade ESL coach for Calcasieu Parish. I understand some entities are worried we're handing out free diplomas. I want to assure you that's not what the appeals process in Bulletin 741, it's not what it outlines. Louisiana has been the only state who has not had an appeals process for graduation. If we were in the top 10% ranking for education, we could justify being the only state that does not have something. I think we are well aware that we're nowhere near the top 10% of rankings for education for our nation, so it's time to do better. Students have been taking LEAP tests, as mentioned in the previous testimony. One student, he took 22 LEAP tests. One test he took 7 times, and he missed graduation, walking with his graduating class by 1 point. Another student, she took the biology exam 3 times and the U.S. history twice, but this student had already proved employability by earning a ServSafe and customer service certification. My stories are from L's because that's who I've served, but this appeals process is open to all. Research shows that the people struggling with these high-stakes exams are minorities. We've come so far in ensuring equal access in education, but we're failing people in graduation access. We're asking for waivers. We're asking you to give a small number of students an opportunity to prove what their education team already knows, that they are employable. Let's not cut off access to graduation. We know that people have a better access to jobs and higher earning wages with a diploma. It's time to do better. Please support and continue this Bulletin 741 changes.
Good afternoon, I'm Liz Smith. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Baton Rouge Alliance for Students. We're an education advocacy organization which believes that an excellent education is every child's birthright. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the children in Baton Rouge to express our concerns about the graduation appeals policy. We believe the policy is deeply flawed and overly applicable outside of what should be a rarely used and exceedingly limited set of exceptions to the state standards for graduation. In Baton Rouge, I think it's important for us to say that the average composite ACT score at our open enrollment high schools is a 14. And like in many other places in Louisiana, only about 1/3 of our high school students are reading and doing math on grade level. As our world gets more competitive and challenging, students who do not achieve grade level scores on high school assessments must be provided with support and intervention, but not a workaround. And of course, assessments exist for a reason, to ensure that graduating students are prepared for their lives after high school, whether that is post-secondary education or entering the workforce. Removing that assurance begs the question, have children truly been educated in a way that will provide opportunities for their success post-high school? And if they haven't, is a waiver of a final assessment ultimately a deep disservice and an injustice to the students who receive them? Graduating students who haven't met the bar of achieving an approaching basic, not even the mastery level that demonstrates grade level proficiency, is not how education leaders help students reach their potential or the future that their families want for them. This board should be focusing on strategies and tactics that will change these statistics for the better, rather than finding ways to work around the assessments that alert us to the challenges that are facing our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Bessie members and Superintendent Bromley. I'm Rich Keelan, and I'm here representing myself as a concerned citizen of Louisiana. I came today to oppose the policy on the graduation requirement waivers that Bessie approved in June by a 6-5 vote. Current high school graduation requirements are modest at best. The diploma's value is its perceived assurance that graduates have the knowledge and skills required to be successful in post-secondary education, the workforce, or military service. It should be a key to both economic independence and a promising future. This new policy instead creates a second-class diploma that ensures little. It was first presented as an option to address the low graduation rates of ELL students. Instead of addressing that issue, which indeed needs solutions, namely extra support for these students, the policy adopted included a universal waiver open to every student. This policy does nothing to improve services for students, and in fact, it hurts students who need help the most. It's being called an appeals process, but it's actually a circumvention of very minimal standards. The Louisiana diploma standards need to be strengthened, not weakened. We're ranked among the top 10 worst in the country for graduating students that are college ready. The mediation rates of graduates show that our standards are already too low. 41% of students entering higher ed require remediation in math, 25% in English. Betsy should be moving to correct this by raising standards and expectations, not destroying them. This ill-conceived policy would no doubt permanently put our state on this list. During a high school diploma in Louisiana, you must pass your classes, attend school a minimum number of days, and score approaching basic, which is one level above failing, or higher on one of either English 1 or 2, geometry or algebra 1, and coming in biology or U.S. history. In order to score approaching basic, a student's raw score versus total available points on the test are as follows. In English 1, 81 of 458 total available points. In English 2, 100 out of 462. In geometry, 30 out of 272. Algebra 1, 38 out of 270. Biology, 44 out of 201. U.S. history, 99 of 276 total available points. Depending on the subject, a student can get as few as 10% of the answers correct and pass the exam. The most required to pass any of these exams is 38%. Additionally, students may take these tests multiple times in order to achieve required scores. This proposal was not properly vetted, with no input from Accountability Council nor other stakeholders. Policy would greatly impact the state's accountability formula and would have a dramatic inflated effect on high school performance scores. Graduation metric is 20% of the formula. Also, to allow the same number of points in the formula to students who graduate under the waiver provision as opposed to students who meet all of the requirements is a disservice to every graduate who earned the diploma by following the state's guidelines. Though disguised as a policy that will help students, it only helps education administrators who, utilizing loopholes in the accountability system, have created scores that already result in 70% of high schools being rated as an A or B school, in spite of the fact that over a third of Louisiana high schools.
Ms. Nealon, please wrap up your comments.
This policy is a disservice to Louisiana students and families, and it compromises their futures. Thank you.
After the 4 speakers who are coming to the table speak, we'll have Terrence Lockett, Barry Irwin, Dr. Ken Ortling, and T. David Pierce.
If anyone who wants to submit anything in writing can get handed to Ms. Rawson.
You have Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Lane Edelman. I'm the principal of Acadiana High School. I ask that you support the Excel appeal process as it gives students the opportunity to prove their mastery of content standards in an alternative way than a standardized test that often measures their English proficiency rather than the actual subject matter it is designed to test. The Excel appeal process will enable students to prove both their content mastery and workforce readiness through a much more intensive and involved process than LEAP alone could measure. I ask that you consider the students with language barriers and learning disabilities that have done every requirement to earn their diploma and struggle to pass a standardized test simply due to the structure of the exam. We are the only state in the nation without an appeal process in place, as every other state has figured out that a single measure does not equal true academic success. We should not be trying to set the example for the nation by continuing this discriminatory practice. I've worked with the students this impacts and assure you the appeal process is not a free pass, but rather an alternative means of satisfying graduation requirements. Please support the students of Louisiana by supporting the Excel appeal process.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Erin Atkins, Assistant Principal at Acadiana High School, and I'm here in support of the Excel appeals process. The appeals process does not diminish the value of a high school diploma. Rather, it requires students to invest more time into a variety of educational opportunities in addition to the 30 hours of intense remediation aligned to the standards for each assessment. These additional requirements force students to invest more time into their ACT and WorkKeys assessments, earn industry-based credentials to prepare them to enter the workforce, and engage in career counseling, dropout prevention, or mentoring services. The requirements of this appeals process hit on every aspect of how our state scores our high schools and our annual school performance scores. Louisiana is the only state in our country to require state assessments for graduation with no appeals process. The other 7 states who require these exams have acknowledged the bias and lack of reliability and validity in a one-size-fits-all approach to assessment. These states have an appeals process to alleviate these issues. This is not the way Louisiana needs to set ourselves apart from other states in our country. It is simply unfair and discriminatory to our students that we are trusted to educate in order to improve living conditions in our state and our own backyards. We trust doctors to treat us when we're sick and contractors to build our homes, businesses, and roads because they're experts in their fields. Trust the experts in this field. Those of us who spend countless hours in the classroom with our students and see the potential impact of these practices. As an expert in the field of education, I support the Excel appeals process on behalf of every student sitting in the desk of our Louisiana classrooms. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Morgan Brown-Cernelia, and I'm here to represent Concordia Parish as the EL Director and as the second Vice President of the Louisiana TESOL Association. I support the appeals process. I am here to highlight an issue in our more rural parishes. When I met Angie at the beginning of her freshman year, she did not know any English beyond yes, no, and maybe. But last year was not Angie's first year in our district. She joined us in the 4th grade. For 4 years, the young lady sat lost and confused in her classes. Her teachers loved her and wanted to help her and tried, but they simply did not have the training in second language acquisition to be able to help her effectively. For 4 years, she never improved conversationally, she never improved on her ELPT, and she scored unsatisfactory on all of her LEAP exams. Angie Herrera Ramos had been missing from the list of students I was given when I began my position as the EL specialist in Concordia Parish. Angie and I met every day for 1 hour a day last year, where I used research-backed full English immersion methods and lessons that kept her in constant conversation and practice with grammar. By the end of the year, Angie was speaking in full sentences, and she not only met the LDOE yearly growth expectation, she exceeded them with improvement in all 4 language domains. Now she is beginning her sophomore year at our magnet school for math, science, and technology and is back on track to graduate. Angie has been saved, but how many Angies are out there in our parishes? How many Angies don't have access to a Mrs. C to help her learn English? I know it's possible for our English learners to pass the LEAPs and other standardized tests when they have effective English instruction. A girl joined us from Guatemala with no English in 3rd grade. Last year, she scored a mastery on her 4th grade math LEAP exam. Last year, an 11th grade EL student of mine improved from an 18 to a 27 on his English ACT. Our English learners are extraordinary and brilliant if given effective supports to learn English. Before we can hold our English learners responsible for passing an English language intensive LEAP exam, for which we offer no translation, we must look in the mirror and hold ourselves accountable as educators and leaders for making sure our teachers can support the second language English acquisition of their students. As a member of the newly formed Louisiana Department of Education English Learner Task Force, I and the other members plan to help all educators of the great state of Louisiana reach our English learners, but it will take time. Until then, please do not punish our English learners for our shortcomings as educators throughout the state. We can do better, and we will do better because we must do better. I implore you to approve the Excel appeals process. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Erin Bendeley, Vice President for Policy and Strategy with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy. Thank you all for being here today and the opportunity to provide comment. I'm here today to communicate our opposition to the proposed policy. As you've heard already, current high school graduation standards are already very low and yielding concerning outcomes. Students need only score approaching basic to pass the test required for graduation, earning a meager 10% to 38% of total available points on the tests. The approaching basic standard, as you've heard already, is 2 full levels below proficiency, just above failing. According to our Louisiana Board of Regents, 41% of our public high school graduates require remediation in math and 25% in English, spending their first year of college relearning what they should have mastered in high school. Yet instead of working to address these challenges through higher standards and improved academic interventions and supports for our struggling students, this proposed policy creates a universal workaround for the 30-year-old minimum standards put in place to ensure our state's high school diploma is meaningful and truly readies our students for college and the workplace. This is not the way. In addition to the proposed policy being misguided overall, there are other more specific aspects that we find deeply troubling. One, this proposal evolved seemingly overnight from an attempt to help students with limited English proficiency to one that allows all students to graduate without achieving minimum expectations. Two, in that process, a number of vital stakeholders and stakeholder groups were not consulted, including families, student advocates, school personnel, colleges and universities, and employers. I'll add to that list your own Department of Education, which has also expressed legal, administrative, and financial concerns when it comes to implementing this proposed policy. The proposal also has a number of undefined terms, unworkable requirements, different graduation standards for different cohorts of students, and excessive new requirements on already burdened school staff. And because this proposal involves students completing portfolio projects graded by school employees who are themselves evaluated based on student outcomes, the proposal raises significant academic integrity concerns and conflicts of interest with school accountability. For these reasons, we ask that you do not approve this proposal as final rule. Instead, we urge you to charge the department with proposing a thoughtful, comprehensive, evidence-based plan to address the needs of our struggling students so that they can truly become college and career ready, enabling them and Louisiana to thrive. Thank you.
We'll take the next.
The next group can come forward. While we're doing that, Alexandra Sanchez. Aguilar Amaya. I am not sure about the first name. Taylor Castillo and Angela Ramirez. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Superintendent and board members. My name is Terrence Lockett. I'm the Executive Director of Education Reform Now, the Education Advocacy Group. And we're here, ERN is here to oppose the Universal Graduator Appeal Policy. We firmly believe that this policy does not address, one, the concerns of ELL students, which is how we started this conversation, and that the appeals process in and of itself should be a separate policy exclusive of ELL concerns. Thus, we believe that this policy was erroneously decided when you took it up several months ago. So first, there should be an appeals process. However, this process should be separate. Separate that is not inclusive of ELL concerns. Louisiana is one of 8 states that does not have an appeals process in place for graduating seniors. This should be addressed. Currently, the proposed policy for appeals only allows for schools, specifically the school board or a school board level committee, to make decisions without the input from either the district or LDOE. This proposed makeup can potentially inject bias into an objective system governed by a set standards designed for all students. There should be a member from each level, district, LDOE, involved. The goal should be that our high school diplomas still matter and are worth more than the paper they are printed on. Enactment of this proposed policy does not get us to that place. Second, we should have a policy for our ELL students. Months ago when we started this process, this is what we were concentrating on. Somehow, from the creation of this task force, we moved on to where we are now. Now, It has been well documented that students who attend high school in Louisiana from another country where English is not predominantly spoken do well on our math and science portions of the standardized testing, but suffer on language arts portions. ELL students need a policy that is equitable and addresses their unique concerns, specifically a policy that addresses their English attainment. In closing, ERN strongly opposes the implementation of a universal grad appeal policy in its current form. This policy does not adequately reflect the needs of our ELL students, nor does it adequately reflect the needs of our high school seniors. And as a body made up of yourselves, of learned people, we should look to continue to push the envelope for all of our students that they have what they need when they leave high school. This policy does not get us there, although we agree that there should be something. This policy isn't it, and should be separated and have a well-thoughtful discussion involving more parties than what took place and created. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Ken Ortling, Vice President of Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, as well as Superintendent of St. Charles Parish Public Schools. For LAS, we represent 69 school systems and over 600,000 students in our great state. We want to express our steadfast support for the XL appeals process. This appeals process is intended to provide a very small number of seniors with an alternative pathway to demonstrate academic proficiency and employability. And it would result in lifelong benefits for seniors who have attained essential knowledge and skills, but may struggle with the difficulties of standardized assessments, such as English language learners and other students with learning disabilities. Appeals Requirement 2 indicates that a student could demonstrate content proficiency through a state assessment requirement or portfolio submission. The Excel appeals process is not intended to remove the expectation that graduates demonstrate proficiency in math, literacy, science, or social studies. It provides an alternative method for identified students to demonstrate a willingness to attain certifications related to workforce development and employability in our state. This waiver would allow students who are unable to demonstrate proficiency on all three paired assessments to do so through successful completion of required coursework and with a portfolio. We're not requesting in-course exam requirements be excluded or school accountability measures for any student, but rather that specific students be provided an opportunity to meet the minimum requirements for high school diploma through an alternative pathway that prioritizes their preparation for the workforce. Options within appeals requirement number 3 include standardized measures of employability. Some students may excel in specific skill sets needed by industry. However, these same individuals may demonstrate a generalized skill set that is measured by these state assessments. If the student can demonstrate industry readiness by earning an industry-accepted certification, then the student's future should not be jeopardized by a general proficiency test that measures specific subject content that may not be necessary. I'll give you a perfect example. This past year from Humboldt High School, we had a student who had earned an NCER or NCCER Welding Level 1 certificate. That's a pretty difficult certificate to attain. And had been offered a job by a local contractor upon graduation. Very high paying job, I mind you. However, the student could not pass one of the paired set of assessments for the end of course required by the state. He was unable to graduate, although he met every other graduation requirement. Earned a valued industry-based certification that the state and secondary institutions value, and had been offered employability that many of the former speakers spoke against, that this is meant to destroy. How is this fair for this one student? Fortunately, this student chose to remain in school and is in school today. And I'm hopeful that he takes additional advantage of opportunities that are provided them in our school system and pray that he passes the EOC if this appeals process is not passed. The Excel appeals process is intended to remove roadblocks to future employability and help students become contributing members of our state society. Options within the appeals requirement number 3 provide students with a bridge between high school and the workforce. By including this as a requirement for the appeals process, these students will be connected directly with workforce development and our industry partners. Even beyond connecting with potential employers, these students will be empowered with the knowledge of how to use these community-based employment services for the rest of their lives. On behalf of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, St. Charles Parish Public Schools, and many great school systems around our state, I strongly urge you to support the Excel waiver appeals process. This process includes requirements aligned to our current national practices and priorities as reflected in states moving towards formative assessments of content with an increased focus on students demonstrating practical skills required for post-secondary success. Additionally, the Excel waivers appeal process is directly aligned with the priorities of the Louisiana Department of Education, including ensuring every student is on track to a professional career, a college degree, or service, removing barriers to create equitable, inclusive learning experiences for all children. Every student matters and every moment counts. So I urge you to please approve the Excel appeals process.
Hi guys, my name is David Pierce. I'm a data analyst in the private sector. I'm not part of any of these groups here today. I have 3 kids in the Baton Rouge school system. My wife and I both taught urban school in Baltimore. I taught urban school in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. My wife has a master's in teaching from Johns Hopkins. I'm an economics graduate student with credits from Johns Hopkins and George Mason. This proposal is just one of the most recent baby steps of hundreds in the wrong direction for holding not just teachers and schools accountable, but students as well. I'm studying economics. I like to think about incentives. What are your incentives? More graduates or a more meaningful diploma? I lived in Africa halfway through LSU. Where I was, there were no Nike products, Adidas products, or Puma products, but there were a lot of products with those emblems stamped on them. Okay? I wore the Rolex that I got in Africa just today so y'all can see it. When I move around, it even starts ticking, but it doesn't keep time even as well as a Timex. It is no Rolex. These brands were frauds. Everyone knew it where we lived. They gave up on getting the real thing. They were used to the fraud. They were accustomed to it. Teachers' incentives. Of my 68 kids at the last urban district I taught at, maybe 2 were on grade level, 5th grade. Okay, maybe 2. It's 95%. The students you receive at the beginning of the year are over 90% below grade level, usually many grade levels behind. That's my experience. The incentives for a teacher are clear. I can curve and manipulate student grades to pass all these kids right along, and no one will come down on me because the entire system has been doing this for decades. I'll still get paid. There is no standard bonus for student growth. If the school leaders in district won't let us suspend or expel just the 5 to 10% of kids who are constantly disruptive, you don't save that 5 to 10%. You ensure that 100% of those kids do not learn what they're supposed to be learning. For employer incentives, I was an employer of minimum wage employees, hired, fired, and trained. My incentive was to hire the most competent and responsible young person I could. Everyone started at minimum and got quick bonuses for competence. For applications, if it wasn't a magnet or a reputable charter school, the diploma meant nothing to me. Nothing. That means kids with a meaningless diploma, they already are meaningless in the real world, outside this building. With a meaningless diploma, they're trapped outside the economy because the law won't let me pay any lower to train those kids up and give them a raise. Those graduates received a fraudulent degree. Student incentives. If I work hard and strive to learn more than my teacher requires, I still get the same piece of paper that everybody else in this room gets for not being on grade level. Our students are learning something, it's just not what we hope. They're learning that life gives you promotions year after year, and eventually a diploma for substandard performance. I'll stop there, my time's up.
Thank you. I'm Barry Irwin, President of Council for Better Louisiana, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. Cable has been involved in education issues for nearly 3 decades. We were one of the early architects of the original school accountability system, actively involved in the state's first high school redesign efforts, and a strong supporter of higher standards and expectations for students. Through it all, our work is focused on the urgent need to ensure that our schools prepare all students to succeed in post-secondary education and careers. Unfortunately, we believe this proposed policy change is a step in the opposite direction, opening a door that would allow students to graduate high school without some of the basic skills they need to be successful in life. This is a concern of cable members who are employers. It's already a challenge for many of them to find qualified workers they need without having to provide them with additional training or skills that they should have learned while in high school. They're concerned that this policy will only exacerbate that situation. But it's also a concern of cable members who have been actively involved in post-secondary education. Last year, some 14,000 students in Louisiana colleges were enrolled in remedial math classes and 4,000 in remedial reading. Adding to those numbers, as this proposed policy likely would, creates extra burdens on our post-secondary institutions while putting already struggling students at yet another disadvantage. We are not opposed to a graduation appeals process for English language learners. We understand the issues there and want to give these students every chance to succeed in a way that will allow them to become productive citizens. However, we do have concerns with this approach as it applies to the appeal process for all students. Louisiana already has set a relatively low bar for students to graduate from high school. We fear that the proposed revisions to Bulletin 741 have the potential to lower that bar even further, calling into question the value and meaning of a high school diploma. This hurts the students who have failed to meet our existing standards, as well as those who have met the qualifications for a high school degree. At the end of the day, our public education system should provide a legitimate opportunity for every child to be successful, both for their personal benefit and to create a more prosperous state for all. We believe the implementation of this proposed policy will have a negative effect on our efforts, and we urge you to reconsider it. Thanks very much.
So we have 4 speakers who are ready to come up, and I'm looking forward to hearing the correct pronunciation of your names. We have 4 more parts after them: Leo John Arnett, Dr. Tia Mills, Emma Merrill, and Taruba Chavez. We'll start here.
Hi, greetings. Can y'all hear me?
No, make sure the green light is on and then pull it close.
Hi, greetings to the board and superintendent. My name is Taylor Castillo. I'm here, I'm chief of staff of Our Voice Nostra Voce. I'm here once again to express my support for the Excel pathway. As I've expressed before, this pathway is a much needed and overdue process that will change the lives of thousands of young people in our state. As you've heard from a number of people today, almost every other state in the entire nation has an alternative or appeals process in place, singling out Louisiana, because they recognize that while standardized testing can be a good tool, it should not be the only tool that you use to measure aptitude. If you hired a carpenter to build you a house and they only brought 1 tape measure, your house would not be standing, because you need more than just one way to measure things. This is the same for students because not every student is the same, and that has been shown by the data that you've heard over the past few months. And it's the same with the LEAP. It oftentimes is not measuring what you think it's measuring, as has been shown with EL students. With them, it is not measuring their aptitude in the subject area, it is measuring their English proficiency, and it's measuring that poorly because that's not what it was designed to do. We need an alternative way to measure the aptitude of these students. It is critical to our community and to our state that we not continue to place barriers in front of students who have given so much to be here and who have worked so hard to achieve academic success, who know the material only for a test to hamper their future, a test that was not designed for them and which is not measuring their aptitude in the way we think it is. There seems to be a misconception that some people are saying that this lowers the bar. This is still an incredibly robust appeals process that still includes a requirement to show mastery through a portfolio project, in addition to workforce credentials. It also doesn't preclude you from having to take the LEAP. You have to take it twice. It doesn't preclude you from having to pass your classes. It has an alternative measure for a small subset of students whose futures are currently in the hands of a test that was not designed for them in mind. This does not water down a diploma, it makes it more meaningful by finally including students who have been needlessly left out by a testing procedure that does not acknowledge them and their circumstances. Excel will provide hope and change the lives of people around our state, and I passionately support it moving forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity of being here. My name is Angela Ramirez, or Angela Ramirez, and I'm from Colombia. I immigrated 6 years ago. I've been studying English my whole life, that's why I'm proficient at it, but it has not been easy. I currently work at Tulane University. I'm the director of the Spanish language program, and I see thousands of kids every single semester struggling to be proficient in Spanish. I'm also the executive director of Puentes New Orleans, an organization that works with Latino kids and after-school programs, making sure they succeed in high school and they have right and various opportunities to succeed after they graduate. And I was very pleased to know that the Excel pathway was extended to other students, because I think equity, or I think standardized testing, is the complete opposite of equity. I think it does not have in mind that students learn differently and can be and demonstrate their knowledge differently. I'm not here to talk against or try to dissuade you from having standardized testing in Louisiana, but we do have to have in mind, as every single, or hopefully many universities in the country are doing, have in mind that students do not learn the same way, that accommodations are not enough, and we have many accommodations at Tulane, and we are very good at accommodating students, but we have realized, and we take various seminars to teach professors how to redesign their syllabi so that their students have the opportunity to shine in different ways. If we only give the students the opportunity to shine or to thrive through standardized testing, we're definitely not being equitable with those students that don't have the ability or don't have the opportunity, or just need to show that they know the content and they have the knowledge in a different way. So right now, I'm just asking for you to consider that things are changing, pedagogy is changing, ways of including kids and being equitable and teaching a diverse body of students, or student body. It means we need to do some changes, it means that we need to evolve, and it means that we need to have in mind who is sitting at the table and giving those opportunities, or the same opportunities, to each one of the kids that are sitting in these classrooms. Thank you.
Hello. Can we
Press the green button.
press the green button and pull it close to you? Go ahead and test it for me.
Hello.
That works. Just a little louder.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Scarlett Maya. I'm here with Excellent Program. I have been living in the United States for almost 2 years with my mom, and my dad is in Honduras. I came looking for better future and education. I'm now a senior in high school, and it's a challenge since I'm still working in my English professions. I'm struggle understanding my classes, just like many young Latinos is different. It's difficult knowing some will take the test. That is very important, though we still don't understand the language. That's why I'm here asking for the opportunity that I students for the guarantee of graduating and continuing with our careers. If attend school every day and pass all my classes, I deserve the right to receive
my diploma. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Alexander Sanchez. I'm here today with the Excel program in favor of the appeal for the equal opportunity for all students, including Latinos, who have to walk the extra mile considering the adaptation to the new country, language, and education system. I firsthand see the struggles and efforts in Latino students in high school, specifically with my sister. Me personally, being a high school graduate, I tried to prepare her for what's to come in her senior year, but my experience is without a doubt completely different than her beliefs. My sophomore year, I failed geometry. It was the one test that kept me back, that almost kept me back from going into my junior year. Now, clearer than before, I know that one test shouldn't reflect my intelligence overall. I am now a freshman in college with a full ride in school. My sister and I both deserve the chance to get a diploma that is not decided by a test score, and so do all the students in Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you.
While the speakers switch chairs, we'll have Cesar Rico come up. He's also submitted a comment card. But the four of you who are waiting, you can go ahead and take your seats, and we'll let you speak.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Leo John Arnett, and I'm here on behalf of Greater New Orleans Inc., or GNO Inc. GNO Inc. is the Regional Economic Development Organization for Southeast Louisiana. And I submit this letter to recognize our appreciation for Bessie to hold this public hearing on the recently proposed revisions which create a universal appeal process for high school graduation. The revisions seek to create a rigorous evaluation method by which students in their senior year who fail to achieve a passing score on the end of the course exam in a testing pair may demonstrate proficiency using a portfolio of work that meets the content proficiency requirements. We submit that the language of the proposed rule, or the original proposed rule, does require more input from the public and from workforce development leaders and employers and teachers. As we believe a high school diploma signals readiness to employers, demonstrating that students have gained the knowledge and the skills needed to transition to college or to the workforce. Assessment of the knowledge and skills a student has learned must serve as an objective signal to the employers or higher education institutions. A process relying on teachers' individual assessment of the student's portfolio project is a subjective measure to assess knowledge gained. Yet, informed by our extensive programming experience in workforce development, GNO Inc. is sympathetic to the concerns of testing accessibility. Students graduating must be prepared for the avenues to further their education or to pursue the workforce training opportunities available to them. And policies must not punish students, many of whom have learning disabilities or language barriers, when it's our responsibility to provide an educational experience that prepares Louisiana youth at the time of graduation for the avenue that they deem fit for themselves. Therefore, we do appreciate this opportunity for stakeholders to further weigh in during this public hearing to remediate some of the concerns of a subjective measure in its pursuit to promulgate rules that address the foundational concerns of accessibility for students in testing that do have intellectual disabilities or language barriers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tia Mills, and I'm an elementary special education teacher currently serving as the president of the Louisiana Association of Educators. I am here today to speak in support of the appeals process. LAE members believe public education is the gateway to opportunity, a gateway to opportunity that a high school diploma can provide. For students who are eligible to appeal the standardized assessment, an alternative assessment can be the difference in being able to get a high school diploma and not getting one. LAE members believe public education is vital to building respect for the worth, dignity, and equality of every individual in our diverse society. This appeals process provides a dignified path for a student to pursue an alternative assessment, one that does not reduce expectations, but provides for a different demonstration of learning. What is a better way that we can show respect for our students than to provide a legitimate, rigorous path to a high school diploma for those who need it most? LAE members also believe that all students have the human and civil right to a quality public education that develops their potential, independence, and character. However, we must recognize that potential, independence, and character are not necessarily measured by a standardized test. This appeals process, recently approved by this board, shows an understanding by this board that sometimes a different path is best to show what someone knows and what they can do. For some students, the alternative would be to drop out of school and never have the power of a Louisiana high school diploma to support their next steps in life. LAE members believe public education is the cornerstone of our republic. Public education provides individuals with the skills to be involved, informed, and engaged in our representative democracy. We believe the passage of this appeals process is a demonstration of democracy in action. We believe that the high school diploma is evidence that a student has benefited from public education. This process provides an equitable path, a path that did not exist before. LAE members are busy presenting lessons in their classrooms today, and we're not able to be here in person. However, there were members from over 20 different school districts who took the time from their busy schedules to send letters to Bessie members in support of this process. Please acknowledge their voice as I speak on their behalf. LAE encourages all Bessie members to support the previous action of this board. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Emma Merrill, and I represent the Excel Coalition as well as Collegiate Academies. And when my colleague, Ms. Chavez, and I started advocating for the Excel process 4 years ago, we did so in support of our English learners. Students who had been trying to pass the same LEAP exam upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8 times in order to be eligible to graduate. But we're still failing, not due to a lack of excellent academic supports or programming, but due to an unfair language barrier that it takes an average of 7 years to overcome. When students are with us in high school for 4 years, they don't have that time. Over the years, it's been inspiring and empowering to learn that we weren't the only educators facing this issue in Louisiana, and that the issue doesn't just affect English learners. We've spoken to students, educators, parents, nonprofits, business organizations, news outlets, law professors, upper echelons of education, who have all had the same experience with this issue. A single test score defining the identity of a child as a graduate or as a dropout. After the Excel's appeals process was passed this summer, I returned to New Orleans and met another educator, Ms. Newton, in a professional development session. She spoke about the Excel appeals process, I didn't know who she was at the time, and how she had advocated for it through phone calls and letters all year just so her daughter could graduate. Through tears, she told me of her honor roll student who has sickle cell anemia, gets consistent blood transfusions at the local hospital, and was actually hospitalized for more than a month of her senior year. Even with teachers providing homebound assignments and support away from the classroom, she was unable to pass one final LEAP exam towards graduation. She was not eligible for Able Done without an IEP. Without Excel, not only would our state be behind in educational policy, since we're the only state that requires test scores for graduation without an appeals process, but we're also treating all of our students as numbers. We're not dignifying their stories, their struggles, their intelligence, or their own unique abilities. Ms. Chavez and I have had a hand in writing this policy every step in the way. We believe in school accountability to serve our students in the best way possible, and we believe that students should be prepared for college as well as the workforce. Because of this, Excel has some pieces embedded in this policy that I want to reiterate now and dispel some confusion and some misinformation we've heard. First, Excel is not a waiver. Students must still sit for tests. We still want them to pass. It is an appeals process only accessible in students' senior year and includes those workforce readiness standards you've already heard today. For accountability purposes, if an LEA is more than 3% of students graduate throughout the appeals process, those portfolios and appeals paperwork will be audited by the Department of Education to ensure all requirements of those students have been met. And finally, Excel embeds the required 30 extra hours of remediation in each subject. Our kids can succeed, and this ensures that we have extra remediation hours. It also ensures that students must show mastery in both pairs of a LEAP bucket. This is more than is required of a typical student who must only pass one LEAP test in a bucket to graduate. What I'm asking today is give our students and our educators a chance students who are actually homeschooled or in private school already have, because they're not held to the same testing requirements for graduation as students in public school. A chance to ensure more of our students have hope, can graduate, and aren't dropping out of our schools and our classes due to unrealistic testing requirements. Because I'm sure we can all agree that alternative of our students dropping out of our schools is much worse than enacting a new policy.
Good afternoon. My name is Chidova Chavez. I'm proud co-founder of the Excel Coalition along with Ms. Merrill, and I want to address how the current iteration of the appeals process is stronger and more objective than the original proposal. When Ms. Merrill and I first proposed this to the board, it was for recently arrived immigrant students who came here 7th grade or later. And this was in response to Louisiana having the lowest graduation rate for English learners in the nation, and to rectify a conflict in policy saying that English learners, by definition, struggle to achieve on state assessments. English learners take 7 years to be proficient in the English language, but still requiring these students to pass their exams for graduation. However, the shortcoming of this proposal was this, that it was default eligibility for students who arrived here 7th grade or later. Default eligibility does not give students or schools incentives to give rigorous experiences, right? And it lowers expectations for students if they are automatically eligible for a process, and we don't want to lower expectations. Some people have said that this appeals process should be for English learners only, and here's why that is problematic. English learners comprise the only subgroup where the expectation is to exit students from that subgroup. Educators and schools are held accountable to moving English learners to English proficient. They must be tested proficient on the ELPT, right? And there are accountability points that are aligned to this expectation. Students who, in Louisiana, students who enter K-5, we are expected to exit those kids in 5 years from EL status. Kids who come to us 6-12, we are expected to exit them in 7 years. And so we cannot introduce a contrary expectation or a perverse incentive to keep students EL, right? To maintain their EL designation, to not do well on the ELPT, just so that they can benefit from a process that is just for this one subgroup, right? So again, this is why the current iteration of the policy to be expanded to all students who meet the appeals requirements is stronger and more objective. A high school diploma should be indicative of a course of study, right? Just ask students who have graduated from non-publics or from homeschools, right? These are completions of course of study. But employers and colleges can look at the rigor of the student's experience, ascertained through their transcripts, through AP courses, through honors courses, through endorsements. And so, in addition, right, the Excel appeals process, we introduced that additional safeguard of requiring evidence of employability. And that was really important because we do not want to just pass students along. We do not want to lower the bar for students that are usually the most marginalized. We want to equip them to be participants in the workforce. And we want them to have a dignified high school experience that is tailored to that industry-based credential, the silver on the work keys, or TOPS 10 eligibility. I want to spend the last few seconds of my comment to commend the supportive BESI members who have had the courage to champion this from the beginning. It is not easy to champion the most marginalized students because they often don't have a voice at the table.
And I want to commend that you have modeled good policymaking by having teachers at the table. Because I felt that at every meeting, at every time we talked about the policy, I felt like my children were at the table and that their voices and their experiences were heard. So thank you for modeling good policymaking in education, because the only special interest that teachers have is that of their students. Thank you.
Mr. Rico, it's your turn.
Good afternoon. Cesar Rico, I am the Executive Director of the ESL Department. I probably should wait for that green button, right? There it is. Thank you guys for the opportunity. Cesar Rico, I'm the Executive Director of the ESL Department for East Baton Rouge Parish School Systems. It's an honor to be in front of you all to speak to you guys this afternoon. Normally I'm presenting and discussing methodology, strategy, supports, research, and a lot of data in regards to helping out our English learners through lots of various techniques and such. So this is kind of a little bit different, you know, and I think Charuba and Emma and a lot of our wonderful educators here this afternoon and in the past have done a fantastic job of really explaining the initiative of what Excel is, what it's capable of doing, and a lot of support as to why we should do it. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do a different approach, because aside from the many professional developments and of course the supports and resources and, that I have to do for our district, another thing that I definitely do, guys, is community involvement, and I try to do that as much as possible, because in East Baton Rouge Parish School Systems, we've got great schools, and we've got fantastic teachers, and we've got awesome students. So what kind of breaks my heart, and I'll just be as candid as possible, is that when I'm called up to go to a special situation in regards to where I have to tell a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who's entering or supposed to be in school as a freshman to come down from a roof, or to please come back and we need to talk about this so I can get you back in school. Or when I'm asked to go ahead and please can you sit down with this family and just convince them, you know, just convince them why their children should stay in school. And I'm just, you know, I'm blessed that I can speak Spanish, of course, so I'll do that in their language. And then I have to go ahead and show them the benefits of the next steps. Because you see, if they don't stay in school, I have no doubt that they're going to find a job and they're going to work. That they're going to have the exact same job for the rest of their lives. When we talk about the Excel Initiative, I'm here and representing our district to support it, because what it does is simply provides opportunity for our English learners, but for so many of our kids, to where we want to see exactly what you've done and what you're mastering, so that way we can excel in your future endeavors, to say the least, right? If I'm a business owner, I want to make sure that you are coming to me with that hope, with that perseverance, right? With that work ethic that you've gained by actually completing all the requirements, the C requirements, the portfolio requirement, for instance, that a high school will be able to provide. If we have to go ahead and support a school in a different way, that's perfectly fine. But overall, I want to make sure that we're supporting our many, many kids throughout this entire district and state, guys, because when I see kids, I see my 5 kids. I see my 5 other siblings. I'm the baby of 6, guys, and I'm the only one who not only graduated high school, but also college and then a master's. I'm proud of my siblings, but I know that if they would have had different opportunities, they'd be in different positions today. So thank you guys for your time, and I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you, speakers. Your comments and recommendations will be taken into consideration in the rulemaking process. The time is 3:24. This hearing is now adjourned.